We are? Okay. All right, I would like to call together the Monday, September 21st meeting of the City of Monona City Council. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Crowell,
Here.
Alder Thomas,
Here.
Alder Groupie,
Here.
Alder Moore,
Here.
Alder Goforth,
Here.
Alder Wood,
Here.
Mayor O'Connor.
Here. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the September 8th meeting?
We have to do the pledge.
Oh, I'm sorry. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
Under God.
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Any corrections or additions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. We have an appearance this evening by Superintendent Dan Olson and Katie Burns Kaiser from the Monona Grove School District. So if the two of you would like to take the floor, so to speak.
Great, thank you, Mayor. And so, as you mentioned, Katie and I are together. We also have Jared Rosing, our Director of Business Services, joining us as well to answer any questions you might have. So we'd like to take just a few moments of your time this evening to talk about the upcoming school operating referendum that will be in the November 3rd election. And so we do have a few slides to share. And again, we'll keep it brief and respectful of your time and give it, kind of a very high level overview, and then certainly take any questions that you might have for us this evening as well. Katie, you want to grab the screen or you want me to?
Ryan and I are working on it here. 1 second.
Okay, got it. So, all right, and I'll go ahead and begin while working on the slides. So, so there are really 5 key things that we really want people to know about the referendum. Certainly, we know about the funding and budget of the schools is really important. We do have an expiring referendum from 2016, and so we're going to talk about the impact of that and the timing of this current referendum. Certainly the cost to our taxpayers of this proposed $3.7 million referendum. What happens if we were not to pass a referendum, what kind of consequences that might mean, and then a few other FAQs that we think are important and an opportunity for the future to engage our constituents in conversations. So to start with in looking at the overall budget. Just as a kind of a point of reference with school funding, now this is statewide. In the last 10 years, inflation has rose about 17%, while state revenue for school districts has only risen by about 6%. Now this is from Wisconsin Policy Forum. Again, this is statewide. We certainly have a little bit different circumstance in our school district, and we'll talk a little bit about how ours is different than that. But the important point is that in general, school funding hasn't kept up with inflation, and that's what causes these challenges and why schools have referendums. And looking at our budget for this year, we did start with a budget deficit of about $500,000. Now, by deficit, what we mean by that is simply to move a status quo budget by maintaining staffing and class sizes, maintaining our programming and our general budgets for all of our programs to kind of cast forward a status quo. We had about a $500,000 shortfall in revenue. So the board did adopt a balanced budget. And so we had to make those reductions. And honestly, where the majority of the reductions came from this year were, again, from our employees. We increased the employees' contribution towards health insurance premiums effective January 1. And that's a really important piece. Obviously, staffing is a major part of our budget. It's about 77% of our overall budget. So if we have to make major changes, it usually comes with staffing costs. The next graph shows a little bit, again, kind of that historical data. This is statewide, and just kind of a picture about what's happened with school funding. We generally get our annual increases on a per pupil basis. So going back to 2007, 2008, Statewide, school districts had just under $300 per student increase. And at that time, that was pretty close to an inflationary increase. And most districts were able to kind of keep up. And then, as you might recall, back at that time, the economy got a little bit tighter. We had a reduction. And then the big reduction, 11-12, that coincided with Act 10, the budget repair bill. And so all school districts saw a significant reduction at that time. And then you can see what's happened since then. It's been pretty uneven. And really, until this past year, really didn't get back in that per pupil amount until, to those pre-2007-8 averages. The difference in the colors on the right is there's a little bit of a change in the funding formula from revenue limits to categorical aid. The bottom line is those totals are what school districts saw as an increase. And so one really important part of that graph is if you look at in 15-16, you see it's flat. School districts were frozen in 15-16. And that's why we had the operational referendum in 2016. I think our board at that point had made reductions for many years. And at that time, we thought, okay, it's time to go to our local taxpayers and ask for assistance to exceed the imposed revenue limits to make up for that reduction and freeze in state aid. Okay, so now we, again, fast forward to where we're at this point. And so there's really three key pieces with the funding that people need to be aware of. That 2016 operating referendum expires at the end of this school year, at the end of this fiscal year. It was for a 5-year, that referendum gave the board a 5-year authority to exceed revenue limits annually by $2.6 million. And so essentially this proposed referendum this November is a renewal of the operational referendum. Without renewing, there's a major reduction in revenues in the school district budget. The second key piece to this one is our staffing. Our ability to attract and retain highly qualified teachers is key. You're probably well aware that there is currently a shortage in teachers. When we look to hire new teachers, the demand has increased dramatically, and it's really for a couple of reasons. One is there's been a significant decrease in the number of students that have gone into education. Over the last 10 years, there's been about 29% decrease in teacher graduates in Wisconsin. And then also within the last couple of years, there's been an 18% increase in teacher retirements. And so all these things have contributed to a teacher shortage. And when it comes time to being more competitive and trying to hire from those small candidate pools, Dane County is very competitive. All the school districts in Dane County are outstanding, and teachers really have their pick of where they'd like to work. There's a lot of other things besides salary, but salary is an important piece, and our salaries do lag behind our Dane County counterparts. So this referendum's not to necessarily get us completely in line, but certainly that's something that we need to address, and some of those funds would go to help assist with teacher salaries. And then the last important piece is the impact of COVID-19. Again, this is a little bit of an unknown. We know that this year, while we're in our virtual instruction, there certainly are some things that we're not spending money on that we normally would, but we also are incurring expenses that we wouldn't normally as well. And so for this year, we do anticipate that it might even itself out and just a shift of how we spend our money. But in the long term, we know that the state is also seeing a decrease in revenues because of the pandemic. So our initial projections are that we could lose by as much as another $700,000 a year because in lost state revenue or authority, to levy through revenue limits. So those are all factors about why now. Why are we doing this operational referendum this year? Okay, so then, of course, really important piece, how does this impact property taxpayer? And so the proposed referendum of $3.7 million, if passed, would increase the property tax rate at 40 cents per $1,000 of fair market value. So you can see on the chart, $40 for $100,000 and so on, for the different levels. So that's based upon where we're at this year. That's the anticipation increase. This would impact the December 2021 tax bill. So if the referendum were approved this November, a year later in December 2021 would be the impact of this operational referendum. Next chart just shows a little bit of a historical record of mill rates in our school district. And we went back to 93 because that was the beginning of revenue limits in Wisconsin. And so at that point, you'll see the tax mill rate was very high, not unlike many districts in Wisconsin. At that time, all school districts really relied heavily on local property taxes. So the legislature, under the Thompson administration, put revenue limits in place. At the same time, the state did pump quite a bit more money. That was at the time when they actually supplied 2/3 funding to state schools. So you see there was a big decrease then in local property tax rates. And that continued to decline all the way down to 05 and 06. And then since that time, you know, a slight increase, and then it's been pretty steady really the last 10 years. And so if you look at those last couple of years, you'll see in 2016, there was a slight increase in the mill rate. That coincided with the 2016 operational referendum. And then down, it decreased for 2 years because in general, our property values in the district have been increasing at a rate higher than our revenues. And so the mill rates continue to drop. 2019, there was a very slight increase. That coincided with our facilities referendum. And you look at that, that was a $57 million referendum. Look, well, that was a pretty minimal mill rate increase. Well, part of that is because, of course, in facilities, you're borrowing money. So that's spread out over 20 years. But the other thing is, again, our property values have continued to increase. So as you all know, you know, as city officials, the mill rate is only one piece of it. That can be a little bit deceiving when we talk about actual tax dollars. But the point is that it's been pretty consistent over time. So the projection these next 2 years, for this upcoming year, we actually do expect to see another slight decrease in 2020. And then that 40-cent increase for 21 would be if the referendum were to pass. Okay, so what if we don't renew it? Well, we know then immediately we're looking at over $3 million deficit to start, you know, the next fiscal year. And so to put that in perspective, how much is $3 million in our budget? Our overall operating budget is about $45 million. So $3 million is pretty significant. And again, about 77% of our budget is salary and benefits, you know, made up of staffing. So without question, to cut $3 million, it would involve staffing. Now, we would immediately, you know, go to our stakeholders and determine, you know, where are the areas that we would have to look at, trying to minimize the impact, you know, on students. But nonetheless, it's a pretty significant amount. And then, you know, beyond that, it could grow to over $4 million in the upcoming years. So it would be a pretty big impact if we did not approve this upcoming referendum. Okay, and then looking ahead, opportunities for other conversations with our constituents to make sure everyone is well informed when they vote on November 3rd or before. We are going to hold a number of virtual open doors. All this information is on our website with the links to those that anyone in the community can join in and talk to myself and some of our other staff to ask any questions and engage in conversation. On October 13th, we'll do a community information night where I'll give a more detailed presentation, a little bit longer than what we're doing tonight, and also Q&A at the end of that. So it's really important in this virtual world that we provide as many opportunities as we can, you know, to get that information out. And then, of course, we want to make sure that our constituents are well aware of their voting information. And so, as we all know, the election is on November 3rd. We also know that many, many people will vote before November 3rd. And that's why now is so critical that we get the information out as people start filling out their absentee ballots, as well as go to the early voting. I just got my absentee ballot in the mail on Friday. Our information fact sheet got delivered on Saturday. So fortunately, that's out there. So hopefully people, you know, have that information as they do their early voting, again, so they can be informed. And then again, all this stuff is on our website, but we do have a special email address set up specifically for the referendum, mgreferendum@mgschools.net, that we can make sure that people that want to submit questions, we can get answers. Of course, our school board is always welcome to, or always willing to answer questions. And then for people that like to pick up the phone and have a conversation, Jared and myself will be glad to talk to anyone. We'll get that, you know, we'll have our phone information out there as well. Okay, so I know I went through that, you know, pretty quickly at a pretty high level, but again, I wanted to be respectful of your time, and I'll be glad to speak to any one of those items in more detail if you have an interest in any of those. So, or Jared and Katie as well can answer any questions.
think you're muted, Mayor.
I'm sorry. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I did. I was just
Doug?
curious to hear a little bit more about the 700,000 projected loss due to COVID-19.
Sure. And I think I'm going to let Jared speak to that a little bit, where that number came from, but that's based upon our state revenues that we're anticipating for the following year. Jared, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So there's a combination. So when we look at the states, obviously when we were putting this information together and planning for moving forward with the referendum, you probably heard of the dollar amount, approximately $2 billion of state revenue lost. And so working through some formulas, K-12 education makes up about 40% of the state budget. And so looking at that, and then in addition to that, we are experiencing some enrollment decline between residents and open enrollment students that are leaving. So when you add those two numbers together, we feel that's where our $700,000 come to. Obviously, it's a moving target, and we know that the Fiscal Bureau just came out and this past budget for the state is experiencing not as bad as they were anticipating. However, we do know that COVID-19 hasn't fully hit the state side of things based on what we're hearing from the governor's office and the Legislative Fiscal Bureau. But what we're seeing right now on just resident decline and open enrollment decline, there is going to be some other revenue losses for the districts.
Do you know where those students are going?
So there's a combination. Some of those individuals are those families are choosing to homeschool their students, which then potentially means that they will come back. However, we will see that revenue has an impact, and the membership count takes a 3-year rolling average. So it will take a couple years to get those full numbers back in the membership counts. We do have some families that are going to private schools, and then we do have some families that are choosing to open enroll to other public schools that are either offering a full virtual that they've had for a while, or other reasons. And then some are just moving. I mean, obviously, I can't tell you exactly the number of families that have that ability to up and move to another school district that's in person. So those are the different areas that we're seeing right now.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to ask for clarification, Jared. When you say homeschool, do you mean that the families are taking teaching responsibilities upon themselves, or is that a virtual learning model that they are doing?
So when I reference homeschool, they are physically enrolling in homeschooling and being recognized by DPI and taking on that responsibility of teaching from home.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I guess not. Well, thank you too, or the three of you, I guess. We appreciate all the information, and as Dan said, if anyone has any questions going forward, you can contact him or Jared at the district office.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, there is no public hearing. There's no consent agenda. Moving down to unfinished business, number 1A, consideration of ordinance 9-20-734, establishing new parking restrictions on Toniwatha Trail and on Winnequa Trail, put forth by the Public Works Committee.
I'd actually like to speak now.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm thinking that we should table this for our upcoming meeting. It is brought to my attention that we did not send letters out to the residents on Toniwatha and or Winnequa Trail. And so in light of wanting to be transparent with the community and making sure that everybody has enough information, we're going to need to hold on this and send those letters out. So I'm making a motion to table this item until those letters can be distributed to the public.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? I don't think we
Nope, it's non-debatable.
discuss, right? So, okay, all in favor, say aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Item 1B, consideration of resolution 20-9-2434, amending the boundary of tax increment district number 5 put forth by the Community Development Authority. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
I'll second.
Okay. Is Gary, were you going to take this one or Brian?
We kind of walked through these three kind of package amendments that accompanied the last time.
Can't really hear you.
We had walked through these three package amendments at the last meeting.
I might have lost these. Can you talk real quick?
Yeah, just
Oh,
tapping the microphone. 1, 2, check. 1, 2. Microphone.
1, 2. Okay, is that better now?
Better.
Definitely.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, we had discussed these three items at our last council meeting. Mr. Becker and I stand for any questions that you might have on the three TID amendments.
Does anyone have any questions on this one?
I just have a quick question about, for those properties that are removed from the district, is there any negative impact on those businesses or organizations or? Okay.
No, not really. As long as there's, those properties will no longer be in a TIF district. And so the benefits of being in a TIF district aren't there to the property owners if they decide to make an investment. But it would be a fairly simple matter of creating another TIF district. It's a 3-month process and you have the TIF capacity. So the city has both the capacity and likely will have the time to create a new TIF district if a project comes forward.
Okay, and I apologize if this has already been covered also, but are the businesses informed or engaged in a dialogue about removal from the district prior to council making a decision about that?
Yes, they received letters for the public hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have any questions on this one? Joan, do you need a roll call?
Yes.
Okay. If there are no further questions, will the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Wood,
Aye.
Alder Core, Alder Core,
Aye.
Alder Thomas,
Aye.
Alder Groupie,
Aye.
Alder Moore,
Aye.
Alder Goldforth,
Aye.
Motion passes. Item 1C, consideration of resolution 20-9-2435, approving an allocation amendment of tax increment district number 6, also put forth by the Community Development Authority. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
I'll second.
Okay, Brian.
Thank you. This is the first of two what's called allocation amendments. So really what this would do would it be to us to allow TIF district number 6 to be set up to be a donor district for other TIF districts. Specifically, we'd be looking at 4, 5, and 9. We at this time do not make the policy decision on how much or when we transfer the excess TIF funds. That would be a later decision at a later date. This is just to set up the mechanism through the Department of Revenue to allow that to occur in the future.
Questions, anyone? No, hearing none. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Goldforth,
Aye.
Alder Wood,
Aye.
Alder Core,
Aye.
Alder Thomas,
Aye.
Alder Groupie,
Aye.
Alder Moore,
Aye.
Motion passes. Next, item 1D, consideration of resolution 20-9-2436, approving an allocation amendment of tax increment district number 8. Is there a motion to approve this?
Move approval.
I'll second.
Same as number 6, but this just would include TIF district number 8, again being set up as the donor for 4, 5, and 9.
Any questions about this one? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Moore,
Aye.
Alder Goldforth,
Aye.
Alder Wood,
Aye.
Alder Core,
Aye.
Alder Thomas,
Aye.
Alder Groupie,
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. This next item related to the stop sticks. I think 2 meetings ago, you had asked to we decided to table this until we had discussed and possibly approved the pursuit policy that is on the agenda for first read tonight. So I'm not sure if you would like to consider this after the first read, or if you'd like to table it till the next meeting when we'll actually be voting on the pursuit policy. Does anyone have any thoughts about that? Alderwood?
Maybe why don't we talk about the pursuit policy and kind of get a sense of whether, there's a lot of questions about what's the changes or what's being presented on that, and then vote on this.
Okay, that's fine. We can move it down after. We can discuss what we want to do after item A, then in the new business. Okay, so then under new business, item 2A, consideration of resolution 20-9-2438, approving police general order 6.02, vehicle pursuits, put forth by the Public Safety Committee. And Chief Ostrenga, were you going to?
Sure, I could start it off.
This
was discussed at the August 26th public safety meeting. During that meeting, we took information that Alder Wood had provided. He was not present at the meeting, but we looked at some of his comments that he had emailed in. We took some information from Mary Delaney, who's a resident from Winona. She had made some recommendations. And we also had a gentleman by the name of John Ferris from Verona, who's the founder of Pursuit for Change. He was present, and he provided a summary of some of his concerns about police pursuits. His son was killed 13 years ago when he was a passenger in a taxi, so it's kind of become his life's mission to oversee police pursuits. So using all that information, we dove into our policy, which Brian has up on the screen, thanks, on page 127, and made some changes. In the first objective, we deleted the word can and added the word does. The next paragraph, we added or death in the policy. There was a question in that bottom of what happens if the OIC is involved in a pursuit. So we put some language in there that if the OIC, the officer in charge, is involved, a non-involved officer has the authority to terminate a pursuit. Going up to the next page, there's really no change on 128. Page 129, at the bottom under pursuits, section IA, and I think this was one of the things that Doug brought up, Alder Wood brought up, about we had different language in there a couple times, so we tried to clean that up. We tried to put in there that the officer has reasonable suspicion. Reasonable suspicion is the basis that we use when we're investigating crimes. So they have the reasonable suspicion as opposed to reasonable cause. Somehow we got reasonable suspicion and probable cause mixed up, not in our minds, but on paper. On the next page, again, we clarified, we put in reasonable suspicion and then gave the reasons for the pursuit. We did delete the section about drug dealing. Occupants of the vehicle are engaged in drug dealing proximate in time to the initiation of vehicle pursuit. So we deleted that from one of the sections. That doesn't mean that if the officers observe drug dealing, they're not going to attempt to make a traffic stop. It just means that that's not a point to justify continuing a pursuit. And then we added some language, and this is where we got language from our guest expert, John Ferris. We added the line about which creates a high probability of death or great bodily harm. We struck out the one portion under D. We added a section about as in the case of a vehicle engaged in reckless driving. And then we kind of renumbered the bottom. Officers shall not enter in a fleeing, eluding pursuit solely for non-violent criminal violations such as traffic or ordinance violation. That was a moved down a little bit in a new section. On the next page, 131, there was some question about when would, at what point when you lose sight of someone, and actually Mary Delaney helped us get that language in. If an officer, that was from another policy, I can't remember where it was, like Seattle or another policy. Philadelphia, thank you. If the officer loses visual contact with the suspect for extended time, approximately 15 seconds, the officer can continue to look for the suspect, but at reduced speeds after following the pursuit termination guidelines. In other words, if you lose sight of them after 15 seconds, the guidelines, which are further down, are that their officers are supposed to slow to the speed limit. It's at the very bottom of the page, turn off their lights and siren, come to at a safe location, come to a complete stop, advise dispatch via radio the pursuit is terminated, continue to run the squad camera, but then they can go back on the last known path, following traffic laws, following speeds, just to see if the vehicle was crashed. Page 134. We have some, replace some language. Instead of should, we have must. So, so if the officer deploying spikes must choose a location with a physical barrier. And then we also added, we'll have adequate time to take cover.
Officer or Chief Estringa, can I make a comment about this section on pages 133 and 134 briefly?
You might guess, those are all the changes that are in the policy.
Earlier in the document or in the pursuit policy, we've changed road spikes to tire deflation devices, and I didn't know if that would be appropriate to continue that language in the section about road spikes, or if you want it to say specifically road spikes here. That was just one discrepancy I caught. And then the other thing is, because Stop Sticks is a brand name, which I know that you have said several times, I don't know if you need to have it appear written a certain way in the pursuit policy or in the policy about deployment of tire deflation devices when you reference it, in case it's like a trademark issue of any kind. That's just a small comment.
Yeah, we did this one, and then we updated the Stop Stick one, and when we get to that one, we changed it and we reworded things to tire deflation devices. So it would probably make sense to where you're using spikes or stop sticks or in the pursuit policy, we should probably use the same language as we have in the other policy.
Thank you.
Did anyone else have any further questions about this?
Mary?
Alder Moore. I'm sorry, I can't see everyone on my screen at one time, so.
Yeah. Chief, if you could, if you would, talk a little bit more about, I know we in committee had quite a discussion about the issue of reasonable suspicion versus probable suspicion or probable cause. And even since that time, I know we learned that Madison has, I believe, Madison has changed to probable rather than reasonable. And I know that was something that Alder Wood also brought up in his initial feedback. And I'm wondering if you can speak to that directly for the rest of the council, if you would.
Sure, I'll give a try. Sergeant Ryan Losby is also on, along with Lieutenant Duman. Ryan is probably more familiar with the terminology as he's a detective sergeant, but reasonable suspicion gives you the right to conduct an investigation. Probable cause would be a higher level, which actually would give you the authority to place someone under arrest. So, I mean, reasonable suspicion, you could look into something, you could stop somebody, you could detain them, but you might not have enough to charge them until you have probable cause. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I guess I was thinking about it in the context of the actual, beginning or the commencement of a pursuit, that you would have to have some or probable or reasonable, if not probable cause, maybe probable suspicion or reasonable suspicion in order to even initiate a pursuit. It's not so much when and if you stop them. It's the actual commencement of the pursuit itself. Does that make any sense?
Ryan, you want to jump in there?
Sure. So reasonable suspicion is what law enforcement needs to conduct a traffic stop, for example. Probable cause, like the chief mentioned, is you have enough to charge somebody or arrest somebody. You have enough evidence to show that. So an example would be if we had information that there were shots fired from a vehicle, it doesn't mean we have probable cause that there were shots fired from that vehicle. It's reasonable suspicion to get that car stopped, to investigate the reports or the allegations, and then at some point we might have enough probable cause to charge that person or release that person. So reasonable suspicion is what's needed for anything traffic related. That's your reason to stop that vehicle, and then probable cause is what is the minimum that we need for charging purposes.
Yeah, Ryan used an excellent example, because that happens more often than you think. We'll get reports of people flashing guns or taking shots at people on the Beltline. We'll broadcast the information. Police officers will make a stop on the car, and then you find out that there's no gun or any evidence that they actually committed a crime. But we have the reasonable suspicion to make that stop. We don't have probable cause to make an arrest. So probable cause is when you actually are charging someone. Reasonable suspicion just gives you the ability to stop them so you can investigate it.
Right.
I might be able to help out here. Reasonable suspicion is a much lower standard than probable cause. Reasonable suspicion means an officer can articulate facts that would lead a reasonable person to suspect a crime is occurring or will be occurring. Probable cause means an officer has sufficient information that would lead a reasonable officer to believe a crime is being committed. So in the chief's example, by waving a gun around, that's enough suspicion to suspect there's something, but without more, there's not probable cause there. If they found a gun or they found other evidence, that would lead them to a reasonable officer to believe that a crime was being committed. That's probable cause. So in the situation here, before you can, under your policy, before the officer can initiate the pursuit, he's going to need reasonable suspicion.
Right.
Could I add to that, or ask Bill to? The flip side of what Bill was saying is that with reasonable suspicion, the officer also has less legal authority to detain or search, has to be much more limited than with probable cause.
Right. Does anybody know I'm just curious, since I believe, as I said, I did read that Madison changed theirs. Does anybody know if I'm mistaken in that? And if not, what the discussion was at Madison PD to take it to a higher standard?
I don't know if Madison changed their policy. I do know that Madison has the last few months gotten more aggressive with trying to stop vehicles.
Okay,
So that may have been what you've heard, but I don't believe they've actually changed their policy.
okay. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions?
I have one.
Well, to go for it.
Chief, I noticed on page 130, there was a comment to the right. It's some clarifying language. I believe it was submitted by John Ferris. And then, but then I noticed on page 142, it wasn't incorporated, and I was just wondering about that. It's item D, on 130. And then he had a statement over on the right. I think that was submitted by John Ferris.
Yeah, he did put it in.
Did that make it in there?
I thought we did, as in the case of the vehicle engaging in reckless driving. I know he talked about reckless driving is very subjective. Yeah, I'm not sure if we clarified it enough. I don't know. Take your input on it.
Does anyone have anything to add about that?
Well, I would say that certainly that it seems like, to his point, the way he's articulated it does seem to be to create a firmer definition of what one might mean by reckless, in a way that might be instructive or helpful to our officers, since, as he said, reckless driving is kind of subjective.
We added in C right above there, we added the language of which creates a probability of death or great bodily harm. Perhaps we could add that same language describing the reckless driving or the immediate need to try to apprehend the person.
Right.
I would agree with that being an easily inserted addition to D that might provide some clarification. Alder Goforth, were you saying that it should also appear later in the document or just on this page?
This page is we have a clean copy on page 142, and that's where I noticed it wasn't in.
Okay.
But the comment is visible on the right there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful. It's just, once again, more clarifying language. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I had a comment.
Doug?
I think this is a much improved policy over what we had, tightened things up, clarified matters. And so, yeah, I like it with, so that's all.
Okay. Alder Moore.
Yeah, I want to echo that, and I want to thank the chief again, and Mary Delaney, who actually is also with Legal Action of Wisconsin, who's provided, and John, who came from Pursuit of Change, and for their input, and to the Public Safety Committee for all of their work. I think it's much improved, and I really appreciate everybody's effort.
Anyone else? Okay. So, well, before we move on to the next one, do you have any thoughts about the stop sticks policy? Should we consider that now, or would you rather wait till next time?
I would just say, as one of the alders who last time voted to abstain based on the need to revise the pursuit policy in advance of approving the stop sticks purchase. I feel very pleased and appreciative of these changes to the pursuit policy. And I feel that if we wanted to take up the stop sticks issue this evening, I would be inclined to vote in favor. So.
Does someone want to make a motion to, I guess, to take it off the table and consider it, or?
I'll move to remove this item from the table.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Is there a motion to approve?
Well,
I'll second.
Any discussion?
I'm sorry, who was the first?
Jennifer.
Jen. And the second was Molly. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Is there any discussion about this one?
I just wanted to reiterate what Alder Groupie said, and as someone who was a little hesitant, because I wanted to see a little more buttoning up, I guess, on our pursuit policy. I'm really satisfied with where we are, and I feel much more comfortable, and I'm grateful to everyone who's worked on this.
Good. Does anyone else have anything? Any questions, comments? Let's check here. Okay, hearing none then, all in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Next item 2B, consideration of resolution 20-9-2440, approving police general order 1.04, code of conduct put forth by the Public Safety Committee. Chief?
Okay, so in your packet on
It's 161.
page 151.
151?
Yeah, 151. I put a little sort of a summary here so you could follow how we got to where we're at. Obviously the Riesling Group is looking at use of force policies, and they're going to have a report sometime in October, but we've been working on this since July in public safety, or June in public safety. And I just want to say that, this is going to be, all these policies are living documents. And I think we're moving forward so that we can incorporate some of the recommended changes that were in the resolution. So on June 15th, the City Council passed the resolution with a commitment of action. Copy of that's attached. Point 5 of the resolution calls for a review of Campaign Zero's 8 Can't Wait. And so on June 24th, Public Safety discussed agenda item 6B, the 8 Can't Wait policy recommendations. That's attached. And then on July 22nd, Public Safety discussed item 5B, which was presented of the 8 Can't Wait and how it was incorporated into our use of force updates. And that summary is also attached for reference. So on August 26th, Public Safety approved the Monona Police Department General Orders 1.04, 5.01, 5.02, and 5.03. So I mean, I can go through all these bullet points, or we could just jump right into the policies. Page 155 is the one where we list the 8 Can't Wait items, and then we note where they are in the policies. So I'm just going to zip right through that, and then I guess if you want, we can now go into, but that kind of gives you a little background as to how we got to where we are at the code of conduct, which is the 1.04 policy that's in this resolution 2440. So the only change to this code of conduct is actually on page 168. The code of conduct is sort of like the rules of the department. These are the things that everybody has to follow. So what we added on page 168, just go down a little bit, Ryan, the other way, the other down. so you can get the top heading. So this is under neglect of duty, and it talks about officers are violating this rule of neglect of duty if they don't do all these things. And the thing we added under number 9 there is the intervention aspect under the 8 can't wait. So failure to intervene in misconduct, improper use of force, or violation of policy by another officer. Officers have a duty to intervene in gross misconduct, excessive force, or other forms of negligence, regardless of rank or status. So this means that they have to intervene. If they don't intervene, they're subject to department discipline. So that is really the only change that we added to policy 1.04, which is the code of conduct.
Anyone have any questions about that one?
I do. I'm wondering, I know often we support other departments and they support us. And I'm wondering what happens in the situation if one of our officers is supported by another officer from a different department and they're using, maybe they're doing something that needs to be called out. Do we have any anything defining what our officers are required to do in that situation?
Well, if they see someone doing something that would be misconduct or improper use of force, excessive force, then they should step in and stop that person. It doesn't matter what department they're on. They would have a duty by our rules to intervene.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Alder Coeur, did you have a question? No? Okay. Anyone else?
Ed.
Doug?
So Wally, your thought is that we should, at the next meeting when we vote on this, should go ahead and adopt it, even though the Rising Group is reviewing this policy?
Well, they're reviewing use of force. They're not necessarily going to look at our code of conduct.
Right. Sorry.
They're not going to look at our pursuit policy. They're not going to look at. They're only looking at like 3 policies.
Right.
We're not paying them enough money to look at all our policies. So my recommendation is that we keep moving forward. These are all going to be living documents. 2 weeks from now, they might have a recommendation that's different, but anything we do to improve our policies now is going to be better than what we have now, because right now we're falling under the policies that were in place back, at the end of May.
Yeah. Okay.
And then also going forward, the state is putting together a committee that's supposed to be making recommendations for statewide policies. So, if we wait for that to happen, it could be years before you update things. So right. I think it's in our best interest to keep moving forward. 8 can't wait. Let's get them in there now so that we're at least made some progress.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Thanks.
Alder Groupie?
I just have a question about a later portion of the code of conduct. I don't know if any of that is up for discussion or if we're just specifically supposed to focus on the 8 can't wait this evening.
The whole code is before you. So if you have a question,
okay. So number 47 under labor activity, the institution of or participation in striking, work stoppage, work slowdown, things of that nature. I know that is commonly, well, not commonly, but sort of as a last resort used by unionized workforces as a means of securing items that they feel will make their job the best it can be, or their working conditions the best it can be. So I just I just had a question about that because as far as I know, the police force is unionized. And so is there a specific sanction against that? I mean, that it needs to be in the policy. I would think that they should have the right to protest if they don't feel that their work conditions are equitable or appropriate or et cetera.
Well, I believe there's a no strike clause in their contract, and I'm racking my brain right now. I'm pretty sure there's something in the state statute that police officers can't strike. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't they can't picket or do something like that if they want to take some sort of other, you know, action to try to voice their cause, but they can't not show up to work because they feel that they're being treated unfairly. I mean, if we did that, we could potentially not have any police officers come to work. So there's protections built in there. So this would sort of give us leverage to make sure that they are following the rules and still come to work, even though they might not agree with what's going on.
Okay.
Anyone else?
I have one last question. I know Wisconsin state law allows individual police departments to set their own policy in regards to officers carrying personal firearms. And I didn't see that outlined in this policy. And I was wondering if you could tell me what ours is, if that's appropriate in this discussion.
Well, that's not in this policy, but it is in another policy as far as
Okay.
what firearms, every firearm that's carried on duty has to be, they have to qualify with it, and it has to be recorded. They can't just, you know, go to their gun cabinet and decide what gun they're going to carry that particular day. They're only authorized to carry a duty firearm or any firearm that's authorized by the department.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Sorry, me again. I just have one last general question about the code of conduct. I don't know if it fits in with the 8 can't wait specifically. But one of the things that we had discussed in an email with Chief Estrenga and a couple of other members of the leadership a while ago was the concept of the philosophy of procedural justice. So in the event of an arrest, when you take the time to explain to the person, the respondent, that this is why they're being arrested, and, you know, it's sort of a de-escalation tactic with a person that you are putting under arrest, so they have a full awareness of what, you know, why the officer is there, what the suspected crime or, you know, infraction is, and then what potential steps will be taken as a result of that infraction. Is that a policy or a philosophy that you're familiar with and something that you implement among your force, or perhaps that you're willing to discuss in future trainings?
Well, I don't know that that's specifically outlined in our code of conduct. I mean, our code of conduct, I don't have it memorized. I could go down line by line. We have to be polite to people. Mm-hmm. We can't be rude. You have to treat people fairly. That comes down to training. There's whole classes on professional communication as to just how to properly talk to people, even as simple as on a traffic stop. They're supposed to identify themselves, who they are, who they work for, and tell the person what their violation was. And then they ask them for their driver's license and insurance and possibly their registration. So, you know, like rude conduct, that would be covered under this code of conduct. If someone was like, you know, screaming at somebody for no reason or something, that would be covered. I couldn't tell you where, but it's in here.
Yeah, I guess I mean more of just clarity of communication during, you know, an arrest. And I'm talking like a low pressure traffic stop or something of that nature, something that, you know, would allow for time and, you know, energy to be expended for that purpose. Just clarity about the violation and what the consequences potentially could be, and whether or not that's explicitly outlined as part of, you know, the policy for making an arrest or an apprehension or et cetera, ticket writing.
Sure. It's not in specifically in the ones that are on the agenda tonight for discussion, but they are covered in policy.
Okay.
The officers are supposed to explain the violation. Like when they go back up to the violator, they give them their driver's license back. They'd give them court paperwork, and they'd explain what the process is once they got the citation.
Okay, thank you so much for answering all of our questions tonight.
I guess, Alder Groupie, just one thing, if you could clarify a little bit, just stepping back to when you asked that question, you mentioned a discussion with executive leadership on an email exchange about.
I think it was just, it wasn't anything in depth, just sort of listed in the potential when we were talking about, I think I sent something about exploring 8 can't wait and, you know, restorative practices, but also one of the things I mentioned was procedural justice within that email. And it wasn't I don't think there was any major discussion about it. It was just something that I had mentioned previously. So I'm doing my diligence to follow back up on having brought it up and put it
I
on the
just wanted to
table. So,
clarify in terms of the open meeting law, if there was some discussion that not.
no, it was just one of my, emails about exploring the 8 can't wait and some other potential things that we should examine as we were moving forward. So yeah, thank you for clarifying.
Anyone else? Have any other questions about this one? Okay, then let's move on to the next one. Consideration of resolution 20-9-2439, approving police general order 5.01, use of force, also put forth by public safety. Chief Ostrenga.
Sure. Just to give you a little bit of history on this, we had in our old policy procedure, it was a use of force policy called 2.000. That one's still in place. That's the one that was probably from, that was in place before I was hired in Monona, that we've updated through the years, but that was kind of a catch-all use of force. And then when we went to the new format, we had 5.01, which was use of force generally. And then we had 5.02, which was supposed to be deadly force. And then 5.03. 5.02 was actually, okay, now I'm getting mine. It's confusing, I know. So we're getting our numbers confused. So we had 5.03 was actually the less lethal. So now we have 5.01, 5.02, and 5.03. So 5.01 is general use of force. 5.02, which is the next one up, will be less lethal, and 5.03 is deadly force. So those got renumbered a little bit. So now I'll go into 5.01. So on page 182, which we have up on the board, we have highlighted the areas of the 8 can't wait portions that are in 5.01. So on page 3, which is actually page 185, and in all three of these, use of force policies, one of the things we've been trying to update wording as we go. So like under definitions, a deadly force, that definition actually changed a couple years ago. So in all three, 5.01, 5.02, and 5.03, that deadly force definition was updated. So as it applies to the 8 can't wait, it highlights that de-escalation was part of this process. Going down, further down, it talks about in the 8 can't wait, a use of force continuum. That is also what is highlighted at the bottom of the page. The next page, again, number 4, it mentions de-escalation. Under that, it talks about the use of force continuum again in both those sections B and C that are highlighted. At the bottom, 8 can't wait, require warning before shooting. It's in section C. The next page, ban shooting at moving vehicles. That's highlighted. Officers should not discharge a firearm at or from a moving vehicle except as the last measure of self-defense. Goes on, it's highlighted. Next page at 188 at the bottom talks about duty to intervene. We talked earlier in the code of conduct. We already had this in the use of force section, and it talks about an officer who witnesses another officer using force in excess of that permitted by law, training, and or this general order must intervene and stop the prohibited use of force. So that was in here before, but what we didn't have is we didn't have a rule against it in our code of conduct. That's why we had to add it in that other policy. Page 190 at the bottom. Ban chokeholds and strangleholds. Use of neck restraints and or chokeholds by personnel of the Monona Police Department is prohibited unless the situation requires the use of deadly force that would be justified. And page 193, reporting use of force. It just has the section X highlighted, but it's basically that whole, 2 pages that would require reports when force is being used. And we were just we had our MPSIS meeting earlier today, and we're talking about as a group with the new record system that's coming online probably within the next month. There's going to be a new tab so that when officers are doing a report, it's going to ask them a yes or no if you use force or not. And if they say yes, then it guides them into the use of force form that they can fill out right at the tab. They don't have to search around for another piece of paper. So it's going to be easier for them to report their force, and it's going to be easier for us to document force. And that is all of 5.01.
Questions? No one? Okay, we will move on to consideration of resolution 20-9-2442, approving police general order 5.02, use of less lethal weapons. Also put forth by public safety.
And page 197, again, this just highlights the two areas that we pointed out of the 8 can't wait points as it applies to 5.02, use of less lethal weapons. So on page 198, it mentions de-escalation measures. On page 199, again, talks about require exhausting all alternatives before shooting. And under definitions, A, it's not highlighted, but that was updated to be in line with the latest Wisconsin DOJ training guide. And it, again, under that, we have the de-escalation is mentioned again. And that is all that was changed under the less lethal policy. Other than the number, it switched from 5.03 to 5.02.
Questions, anyone? No. All right, then we'll move on to the final one, consideration of resolution 20-9-2441, approving police general order 5.03 deadly force, also put forth by the Public Safety Committee.
On page 206, this was again presented to Public Safety on August 26th, and we changed, it just highlights the areas that highlight the 8 can't wait processes. So on page 208, require exhausting all alternatives before shooting. Under definitions, the Wisconsin definition was updated. Page 209 talks about de-escalation again. Below that, again, it shows about use of force generally. Use of force can only be used judiciously and wisely. Goes on and on and on. It's like a last resort. Exhausting all alternatives before using deadly force and shooting. Page 210, the 8 can't wait, number 6, ban shooting at moving vehicles. Page 211.
Sorry, I have a comment on page 210 when it talks about no legal distinction in the use of deadly force against juveniles as compared to adults. Can you just explain that a little bit? That sort of stuck out to me, and I'm not exactly sure what, I think I just need some more clarification on what that means.
You said page 210?
Mm-hmm.
It's like number 10.
Number 10 on 210, yep.
Yep, towards the bottom. There's no legal distinction in the use of deadly force against juveniles as compared to adults. So in other words, if a juvenile is pointing a gun at you, you have the authority to use deadly force against that juvenile. It doesn't matter if it's a juvenile or an adult to use deadly force.
And what if, I mean, juvenile is defined as age range typically? I mean, I'm just wondering if it's like a little kid, like a 12-year-old kid. I mean, I don't know. I just, like if it's a juvenile, clearly does not know how to discharge a firearm or That, I just found that to be concerning that there was no distinction, so.
Let's play the what if game. What if you're at school and what if a juvenile is going down the hallway that's 10 or 12 years old with a shotgun shooting people? Are we supposed to just let them continue, or are we supposed to stop the threat?
Yeah, I guess I just wondered if there would be a difference in protocols between somebody who is skilled at or knows how to use a firearm knowingly and a juvenile who may or may not have that capacity.
Well, you don't know. You don't know if an adult is what their skill level is either. You know, they may have just, I've known many cases where someone just goes to the gun shop and buys a gun and starts shooting people, and they've had no prior training, but they've still committed crimes. So in juveniles cases, you don't know if their parents have taught them how to use the firearm or use weapons. They could be very skilled. If once they, you know, start exhibiting the point where deadly force is authorized, there's really, that's why it says there's no distinction.
Okay. It just makes me a little uncomfortable.
Alderwood?
Yeah, just to follow up on that, I mean, do you think the officers would take a different approach in evaluating the threat based on the age of the person, and in terms of like making sure that what they think is a gun is actually a gun, not a toy gun, or a knife, not a toy knife kind of thing?
Well, it's going to depend on the circumstance. I mean, if they see, if it's like in the middle of a park and some kid has what looks like a gun in their hand, if they're not threatening anyone with it and there's no bullets coming out of the barrel, sure. If they can, you know, try to engage them a little bit differently. But if it's absolutely a gun and they're using it to seriously hurt people, you don't have that opportunity to make that call.
Right. That's obvious, but I think, I mean, I understand where Alder Groupie's question is coming from, but like you say, I suspect it's going to have to be a case by case analysis. But you know, if you see an 8-year-old with a handgun versus a 12-year-old, I assume they're going to evaluate that threat level differently if there's not obviously active shooting going on.
Sure. I mean, I heard there was a call on the radio the other day in another community where they were in the stands of a football field and they were supposed to have a gun in their possession, and there's kids down on the field playing. So the community responded, and they had, you know, some officers were approaching, some officers were from a distance, and the officers at a distance had his rifle out and he was covering the area because he didn't know what to expect. It turned out it was just some kid and he had nothing in his hand, but someone called it in. So, you know, it's like you say, it's a case by case thing. I've probably said this before. You get these kind of calls and you have to plan for the worst, but you hope for the best, that it all works out. And you know, no one wants to, you know, use deadly force against some kid. I mean, that's the last thing anyone wants to do. But you also have to recognize that bad things happen, and it doesn't say like you can't do bad things until you're a certain age either.
Right. I guess while I'm talking, I just had kind of a general question on, I guess it would apply to all these procedures and the whole process. What is your sense of how your officers are, you know, on the whole, are taking this scrutiny, these changes? If you think they're, I guess those are two different questions. I would imagine the scrutiny is probably not terribly pleasant, but in terms of embracing the changes or resisting changes, is there anything you can tell us?
I think people want guidance. I mean, they want to do the right thing. they want to do the right thing, but they also want to go home at the end of their shift. So they want to be safe. So all these things, they're in another format. They're not really that much different from the existing 2.000 that we had before. It's just a cleaner version that probably describes things a little bit better. But they're not much different from the old policy. These are generally accepted practices. We got these policies from a company that produces policies for agencies in Wisconsin. So this is pretty common language.
Alder Thomas?
Yeah, I was going to say, it's surprising that there were language changes from should to must and things like that. But in terms of real behavior, there's not a huge substantive difference that's going to make their life more difficult, I don't think. Is that a fair statement, Wally? I mean, that was what it seemed to me.
I think so. I think it's also, it's dividing it up a little bit. Instead of having everything globbed into one old policy, it's dividing up into 3 different segments so that generally here's the use of force, here's less lethal, and here's deadly force. So they can concentrate on one aspect of that policy and really study it well to know when you're, going from, like just basic hands-on to a deadly force situation, if that makes sense.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go on, Kathy.
Well, I was just going to say, someone has commented during the period where we were looking at this saying we have a lot of young police officers. And that may be true in terms of comparison to other departments. But I also think attitudinally, there's a benefit to that. Because I think they look at things differently, and they're, if I can use the term, kindler, gentler police force. I mean, I notice a difference from sort of the way they function or the way they talk or the way they behave than from, say, 20 or 25 years ago, the way the officers were. So I think they welcome our support and are being involved and the reasonableness of it all and direction and guidance.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the whole, not even looking at these policies, but just in general, the discussions we're having of how we can be better people and how we can treat people better. They want to know how to do their job better. And if you don't keep practicing those things, you lose it, because you get, as you move on, you get cynical and you get jaded, and it has to be a constant reminder of the people you're dealing with. What sort of life are they coming from, and being compassionate. So it's constant, and it's probably something that we don't stress enough in our training that I think is the future. That's the direction we're moving in. We have to constantly remind people of how people are where they are and why they are that way and how we can treat them better.
Anyone else?
Mary?
Nancy? Alder Moore?
Yes. I was just going to say, from my viewpoint, having sat through all the public safety meetings as well, that my sense is that we're making a good effort to obviously review all the tools or many of the tools that the officers are using, including clarifying their orders. But as I have thought about it over the last few months, I feel like it's really less about the tools themselves and more about how those tools are applied, which obviously very much relates to the orders, and the training, and whether the tools are applied equitably, more so than they have the wrong tools. at least from spending a lot of time reviewing the orders, certainly is one of those tools. It's, as we pointed out, it's not so much how they're written, although I think we've made some good clarifications and added some things that are important. But like I said, it's more about how are they applying the tools, how are they using the tools, and are they using them safely, and are they using them equitably?
Anyone else?
Just to finish up on page 211,
Mhm.
a couple more points here that I don't think we got to, unless we didn't. I can't
Oh,
remember.
you're right. We kind of started talking and,
Okay, 211, go the other way, Brian. Too far.
okay.
Okay, so this has require warning before shooting, ban chokeholds, require comprehensive reporting, and that's all for 5.03.
Anyone have any additional questions or comments? Alder Corr?
A question for Wally. I'm curious, how different are these policies from what an officer would get at the academy? I mean, essentially, is this a lot of repetitive? We seem to have been saying that a lot of this is out of state statute and kind of across the board standard amongst our peers within the community. I'm just curious if anything really is that much different.
Well, I think this is pretty close to it. I mean, they don't teach chokeholds in the academy. This is more into the nuts and bolts of your individual department, but the state statute, they're going to have a law class, and in that law class, it's going to talk about searches, arrests, and force, and using deadly force. How much force can you use? How much force can't you use? Those are all topics that are covered in the academy.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I had one last
Alder Wood.
comment. Yeah, I thought that Wally made a really important, good point when in talking about the, as in particular, I think in their job where, you're obviously dealing with people not in good situations very oftentimes, but it's easy to get cynical and that it's important, as he said, to keep working on the sort of human aspect of reminding yourself, just stop and think about who the other people are that they're dealing with. I mean, I'm glad that we're reviewing the policies, and I think have definitely made some improvements. I'm a little skeptical in general that just changing the policies on paper changes outcomes tremendously. I think we've seen that in other places in the nation over the last months, where there were good policies in place, but the officers, acted contrary apparently to those policies. So it's, it is that human ability to, I think, to empathize with the people that they're dealing with that's important, and to be reminded and work at that.
Anyone else?
Mary?
Alder Thomas.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Wally for the way you put this together for us, because it was easy to read. It was easy to see the changes. Not every document I've gotten has been this easy to see the differences. So in the midst of everything else you've been doing, I'm grateful that that you did it this way, and I thank you for that. And I'm sure we all know that Wally's leaving soon, but 43 days, is that right, Chief? So we'll take everything from you that we can get while you're still here.
That's
So
only,
thank you.
only if you count today, so tomorrow will be one less.
Who's counting?
Yeah. Well, I'd like to thank the chief, and I'd like to thank Alders Thomas and Moore and the members of the Public Safety Committee who put in some long hours in meetings talking about all this, and members of the community who came out to add their thoughts and give their input. So yeah, it's been quite an involved process for the last few months, and thank you very much for all your work. So that closes the items related to the police general orders. We just have one more item, F, consideration of resolution 20-9-2443, amending the 2020 capital budget to fund earnest money for the purchase of the San Damiano property put forth by the city administrator, and this is starred for immediate approval.
It's out of order.
Yes. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Is there a motion to approve this?
Move approval.
I'll second.
Thank you. As you recall, from our meeting, last council meeting, with the acceptance of the purchase offer, there was the $100,000 of earnest money that the city has to put down towards the purchase. We're requesting a budget amendment from the 2020 capital to transfer $100,000 from the savings from the McKenna Road project to cover that $100,000 earnest money. So staff is asking for your approval so we can transfer the funds and complete that portion of our purchase agreement.
Any questions? No, hearing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Groupie,
Aye.
Alder Moore,
Aye.
Alder Goforth,
Aye.
Alder Wood,
Aye.
Alder Kerr,
Aye.
Alder Thomas.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. We will move on to reports of committees, commissions, etc. Yes, Alder Kerr, do you have a report?
No report. Thank you.
Alder Thomas,
No report.
Alder Groupie,
No report.
Alder Goforth,
No report.
Alder Wood.
Sorry. Parks Board met last Thursday.
Alder Wood seems to have frozen. Let's go on to Alder Moore and see if Doug comes back.
I have nothing to report.
City Attorney Cole.
Nothing for me, Mayor.
Police Chief Ostrenga, did you have anything else you wanted to say?
Sure, I'll just, I sent you all an email, just to give you an update what's going on with this most recent incident. Can't really talk about it. It's moving forward. Kind of see what happens and hope for the best. It was kind of scary for people at City Hall, and we're trying to put some things in place so that we can communicate better when things like this happen. We did get some complaints from residents who were complaining about the traffic during the protest, but at this point, there's not much we can do. We try to encourage people to act politely and safely, but as you know, we just don't have any control over that. So do the best we can. That's all I have.
Okay.
Do we have a camera in City Hall in the entrance in the?
Yes, we have multiple cameras around the building and also in the hallway. I'm pretty sure that's probably why we didn't have any damage. But we'll hope that's a one-time incident and it doesn't repeat, but you never know these days.
Alder Wood, would you like to finish your?
Yeah, that was, I could hear everybody, but anyway, just was saying the Parks Board met last week, approved the operating budget, or not approved. Yeah, we did. Anyway, reviewed the operating budget and moved it on, and also approved the revised Stonebridge Park concept plan. And then I had a front row seat for the events on Saturday, being that was part of it was across the street. So
Very helpful. City Clerk, do you have anything to report?
I do, Mayor O'Connor. We, last week, Wednesday, with the help of some election inspectors, we mailed out 3,000 absentee ballots. I mean, very close to 3,000. And we already got returns on Thursday. People got their ballots like overnight, just about literally. So it's pretty amazing. So, and then today we received back 134 from the weekend in the Dropbox, which is doing booming business. And we mailed out 75 more. So there are a lot of absentees, people taking advantage of the absentee opportunity and paying attention to getting them back early, which is great.
That's great.
Yep, and I want to thank the Public Works crew, Jeff Johnson and Ron Hoffman. We needed to have a security seal put on the Dropbox, and I really didn't want to have a sticker or something that would mar it in any way. And they very carefully welded on a couple of rings that I could put a security seal through, and that is just perfect. And it's just really good. It's tamper evident. It's not to help lock it. The box is locked, double lock, and only Aline and I go out there. So that's all going really well. So we're set to jet.
Joan, can you remind us of the last day to request and deliver absentee ballots?
The last day to request a ballot is the Thursday before the election, and I don't have that date off the top of my head.
It's okay. We talked about it last time, but I needed to ask again.
And then the last day to deliver a ballot is, if you're going to hand deliver it, is on election day by 8:00 p.m. It has to be back. We are going to clear that box out at 8:00 and take the ballots to the polling places. So that, but please don't wait, because if there's any kind of problem with your ballot, your certificate envelope, we won't be able to fix it then. Out of all those ballots I cleared out, I had 8 that I needed to contact voters because they didn't fill them in completely. We only had to mail back 2, thank goodness. But if you have that kind of issue on election day, there's nothing that we can do to fix it. So please, 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 early, early, early.
Mm-hmm. And mailing back, same thing. It has to be there on election day or postmarked by election day. What's the rule for that?
I just saw a news blip tonight that the court has extended that time, but I have not had an official word from the state yet on that. So I really don't want to comment just in case it's not for real, but it sounds like there may be an extension. But the problem with the extension is that it does require postmark. And if the post office neglects to put a postmark on, or the postmark is illegible, it's worthless, and I can't count that ballot. So we need to make sure, continue to take matters into your own hands, voters, and get your ballot here. Do not count on other entities to do that for you. If you're going to wait, then you're taking a risk. So
thank you so much.
We're urging early.
And Joan, early in-person voting starts Tuesday, the 20th of October. Is that right?
Yes, Tuesday, the 20th of October through Friday, the 30th of October. And then the 2 Wednesdays within that time period, we'll be there till 7. And then the Saturday in the middle of that time period, we will be there in the morning from 8 to noon.
Okay.
At City Hall.
Great.
So, and that will be published. It's already on the city's website. So just watch for the notation if you forget the dates. It's all there.
Okay. Attorney Cole, did I already ask you? I can't remember. I did. Okay. City Administrator Gatto, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, just one thing, a note for your calendars. We're looking at October 13th, which I believe is a Thursday evening, for our first community listening session with co-hosted in partnership with the Nehemiah Center. So more information and more advertising and marketing to follow on that, but just wanted to put that on your calendars for now.
I'm sorry, what was the date again?
The 13th.
October 13th. Which I'm sorry is a Tuesday, sorry.
Okay, I just had just a little update on what's happening with San Damiano. As you know, when we agreed to explore the feasibility of raising funds last spring, it was with the intention of keeping it as public space if we were able to buy it. And the consensus was that it should be preserved as public asset and that there are groups and individuals who are likely to financially contribute to that effort. So that is why we went ahead and made the offer that has now been accepted, and we're going to be paying the earnest money tomorrow. So I've been meeting with Jake and Brian and some of the steering committee who is involved in doing that research. But between now and June, my focus, as well as one of the major focuses of the Friends of San Damiano, is going to be on raising funds from a variety of sources, including grants that we've already heard of, at least one that we think we have a good shot at, and from individuals and other organizations in order to defray the cost of the property for the taxpayer. We don't close until June, so we have some time to do that. And at this point, we are not planning on developing it as anything other than a public space. So just, I know there's been some questions out there about that. So if you have anyone approach you about wanting to contribute, please contact me or Alder Moore or Brian or former Alder Kitzler, who's heading up the fundraising effort through the Friends. I know a lot of people are interested, so we're happy to take any contributions. The only other thing, remember that our first committee of the whole for the capital budget is this Thursday. I think you probably all received an email from Leah earlier today saying that if you'd like, she sent the digital copy on Friday, but if you'd like a print copy, let her know and she can put it in your mailbox. I don't think there's anything else in terms of reports. There are several appointments of election inspectors. Is there a motion to approve those?
I'll move.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Appointments are approved. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Mayor?
Alder Moore?
I was just, if I could, it's not a report, but if I could just say one, as I sit here, I'm thinking I have the distinct privilege of serving with the Monona's first female mayor and serving with 4 other women who are rock stars and one enlightened guy who's been a rock star for a long time. And Kathy, I think that you probably served on a council that was where you were the only woman for a good period of time, right? So I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the fact that were it not for Justice Ginsburg, that would probably not be the case. So, champion of justice, equal justice for all, not just for women, although certainly that gets raised the most. And I think she'll be sorely missed. And I'm glad that we're all able to step up in the way that we are, following in her on her big shoulders.
Yeah, I think we all agree with you on that. It's a tragic loss. It really is. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 We are adjourned. We'll see you all on Thursday.